Hey, I'm Liam and this is my hobby room. Today I have something very exciting to show you. I picked up a kit I'm really excited to work on, so I'm going to show you that in just a sec. I'll show you what it looks like before it's painted, then I'll paint it, and then I'll do the other thing. You know how I do things. This is a 1 to 1200 scale white base. It's a very old release. Comes with some little minifigures here of the gun parry, gun tank, gun cannon, and the Gundam. Some optional parts here on the side. Look at this thing. This is some classic plastic. Here's some other kits available from the same line, the Musai and the other one. I can't remember what the other one's called. This is a special kit to me. It's a very old kit, but it's a special kit. I love this box art too. Woo! Look at that. All right. So, check it out. This is, okay, so it's gonna be a lot of masking. Okay, here's the parts for the gun parry. I actually do have a 1 to 144 scale gun parry built up. I'll have to showcase that sometime. Here's your tiny little Gundam, tiny little gun cannon, and tiny gun tank. So these are just solid color runners, giant pieces of plastic, and a nice instruction manual. I haven't seen one like this in a while. I haven't built a classic kit in a long time. Now these, while they do have some friction pegs, they're really only guides, and most of this is just held together, will be held together by cement. Oh god, look at that. So we're gonna build this thing together. I'll go through some modeling tips and tricks, some great supplies to use that'll help you out while you're constructing, and then we're gonna paint this thing. So here's a little fun thing. This kit is so old that these runners aren't actually lettered. They just have numbers. I was expecting to have to do a lot more cleanup on these parts, but looking at them now, there's actually not a whole lot of uneven plastic. Oh, I say that, but you can see it here. So these are actually just divots that are gonna have to be filled in with some putty. But yeah, so the bigger parts don't really have a lot of uneven plastic on them, from what I can tell. I may be totally off base on that, but it doesn't look too bad. This is, I think this is the stand here. Those big radar dishes on the side. Oh, they have raised details, so that's interesting. Oh, we got lots of flash. That's one thing I will say about these kits is lots of flash around the outside here. Here's a little stand. Ooh, it's a bit wobbly. I think this painted up black with a nice little SCV-70 white base decal on there would be pretty sweet. So I'm gonna be cutting out some parts here, and you can see I'm just leaving a bit of extra room so I can get rid of that nub on my own terms instead of, you know, divoting it any further. This whole working around the camera thing is a lot harder than it looks. So here are some vents that it comes with, and I have some photo etch parts that I might put in there just to kind of spruce it up a bit to make them look a little more vent-like. Let's see if I can dig these out. Alrighty, so here's some photo etch parts that I might cut down. Some of them might fit, I'm not quite sure. I haven't measured anything out yet, but to pop in these vents here to give it some extra detail, I think that would be kind of cool. Here's a little thing that I like to do. When I'm building a kit that has a bunch of tiny little pieces and I'm not really sure what I'm doing with them yet, sometimes I'll cut them out and I'll just put them in like a little container. Like this is just a paint cup I use every now and then. And yeah, that way they're safe in there and I won't lose anything. So that's foolproof, at least as far as I'm concerned. So now we're going to take a look at getting rid of some of these nubs and seeing if there's some uneven plastic on these. Alright, so we've got some extra nub here. I'm going to be very gentle. So as I cut this out of the runner, I made sure to leave this little nub here so there's not a lot of built-up pressure to make a new divot. So what I'm going to do is snip most of this off. There we go. As you can see now, there's still a little bit left on there. Go. So yeah, you can see there's actually quite a bit of flash here. Let's get the camera to focus. This is pretty much all over the kit. So this is where the two halves of the mold meet, and a little bit of extra polystyrene is kind of squeezed out of there. This stuff is pretty easy to remove just with a hobby knife. You can just run alongside to clean it up a little bit. So I'm going to show you what uneven plastic looks like. Just with your eye, it'll be easier to see if you're looking at your kit not through a camera or a screen. But basically what all this means is I'm gonna have to use some putty to fill these gaps and then sand it down once it's cured, and it will be good as new and totally flush. So what we're gonna be using to do that is Tamiya Basic Type Putty. So we've got some Tamiya Basic Type Putty. There's gonna be quite a bit of puttying on this kit. I'll just do this to show you. We'll just squeeze some of that out. A little bit goes a long way, and a lot will come out of that thing pretty quick. So we just take this and apply it like so. But it does tend to shrink up a little bit, so it's always good to have just a little bit extra over the part that you need to cover up. Most of this we'll be cleaning up after they've been joined together and cemented and puttied up. We can sand them down, make them nice and flush. So I'm not too worried about the surface right now. So if it's a little scuffed up, that's okay. So when I go to build a kit I intend to paint later, I go through the manual and see which parts I can get away with cementing together. What will I have trouble prying apart later? For disassembly. Normally, if something needs to be snapped together at this stage, I'll cut the pegs down a little bit so there's less friction holding them together. That way, they'll be easier to disassemble for painting. So we're about to use some cement and get this stuff stuck together. And then it's got a cure. And using the miracle of technology, I can come back to you when it's all joined up and it'll be like it happened instantly. So I will be using Tamiya cement, which is my favorite kind of cement. This stuff I've been using for about 15 years. I absolutely love it. They make a thin variant and an extra thin variant. They both have their uses. For this, I'm going to be using this one here, just because I really want to make sure I can get as much of this closed up as possible. Once everything has been cured up, once all your putty's been cured, all your cement's been cured, it's time to get sanding. Every surface can be sanded. Some details might need to be rescribed, but you don't have to worry about that yet. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Sand with a medium grit. You don't want to scratch up your kit too bad, or you'll be having to putty it over and sand again. So since that's the next step, maybe it's not such a biggie, but I like to avoid mess when I can. So we're going to take our sanding stick here, and we're going to get to work. Now, I tend to do a lot of my broad sanding work with a sanding stick like this, just to kind of just to remove some of the larger bits of grit, and then I will move in with some tools that are better suited for precision sanding to get rid of all the stuff that I missed. So I don't intend on getting everything with this sanding stick, and these are so worn down. I don't even know how long I've had these sanding sticks. Actually, I should get new ones. They look pretty awful. So you can see where, as I'm sanding this down, the putty that's left over here is still sanded, like it's still sanded right down, but this is all divoted plastic that's been filled in. And because this is the bottom of the kit, you know, it's not really like it's that noticeable, but there's a lot of that divoted plastic all over this thing. So some judicial use of Tamiya basic type putty will really go a long way. So when you're doing this much sanding, another thing to be aware of is that you're kicking up a lot of particulates into the air, and you're probably going to be breathing them in. So I advise you to use a respirator or just like a face mask. If you have like a dual cartridge respirator that you use for painting, that's something that you should probably be wearing right now. I mean, you don't have to, but there's no sense in taking a risk if you're doing this much sanding. It is your health after all, and that should be the most important thing. But then again, not all sanding jobs are this intensive. You might have noticed during this phase in sanding that I've avoided using a metal file, and that's just because I've done the majority of the heavy sanding already, and I don't want to risk scratching up the parts further with a metal file and then have to putty and sand them down again. So that's why I'm not using a metal file at the moment, though some areas are giving me a little bit of trouble, but that you can just wear them down gradually with whatever sanding implements you have, like a sanding stick or sandpaper, sanding sponges, any of that kind of fun stuff. So now that the 1200 scale white base has been sanded, some of the putty that I've used to clean up all this uneven plastic and seam lines, let's just say I was a little overzealous, and I might have accidentally filled some of the panel lines with that putty. This happens to me all the time because I tend to get a little excited with the putty, and I tend to smudge it around areas that I probably shouldn't be. But this is a good opportunity to do a little bit of teaching, I guess. So this is the Tamiya Plastic Scriber 2. This is a great little tool for scribing. What we're going to do here is just go over some of the lines that I've covered up with putty that need to be cleared out. So you want to be very gentle when applying pressure with this scriber. The problem with applying too much pressure is that you will most likely end up divoting or making another mark. And while you can fill it in with putty and sand it down again, if you have to scribe through that putty is going to be very brittle and it's going to crumble. So we want to avoid any of that by just gently Gently scribing. And if you run into any resistance, don't force it. Just rise over it and try and remain in that channel. A lot of times when I'm building older kits like this for instance, this one came out in 1980, the details are so soft that I find myself re-scribing a lot of them, just to give them a little more depth, a little more sharpness. The rest of the white parts seem to be fine. It's just these four legs here for the white base that need some work. So if you take a look here, you can see these have been almost completely filled in with putty. These ones are a little less closed up here. So I'm going to be very careful with my plastic scriber. I'm going to lay this down nice and firm, and then just gently trace it. Like that, and then the way back as well. Yeah, it's not so bad. So that one was a little tougher. But again, you don't want to force it. If you feel resistance, just glide through or over it if you can remain in the channel. If you feel like you're about to skip over the panel line, you're going to jump the channel or something, then just leave it for now and clear it out with a hobby knife. So after you scribe, you're actually going to be pushing up little bits of plastic along the edge of these panel lines. So what we're going to do is take our polishing sanding sponge here, or sanding stick, or whatever you have that polishes, and we're going to give it a once over. And this will kind of help unify all the scribing we've done, all the sanding we've done. It's going to blend it all together and get the surface nice and ready for priming. But of course, before I prime, I'm going to show you what the kit looks like all together. So here is the 1 to 1200 scale white base, or most of it anyways, so everything that won't be falling off without glue. Here it is up on its stand. You can see where a lot of the joins have been made, where everything's been sanded down. I did make a little mistake where I actually accidentally assembled both sides of these on the wrong end. So basically I've had to saw out a part to attach this nacelle to the back, but it wasn't a very difficult fix. You can see that's why this section here has a hole in it and the other side does not. But anyways, this is what it will look like, sort of snap together out of the box. It doesn't really snap together, which is why all the tape is on there. And now we're going to get to taking it apart again and priming it. And because we've sanded in all these surfaces, the primer is going to go on nice and smooth. We're not going to have any trouble, and you guys will get to see the finished product. So that is building in order to paint. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint it up, and you'll be able to see how that preparation translates into the finished product and why I do certain things, why I stress putty so much, or why I talk about sanding so much. It is important, and it does help you get a super flush surface, a really nice finished surface for your finished product that you work so hard on. If you're gonna sit there and work for hours and hours and hours on something, you might as well make it look as nice as you can. Of course, that's what makes me happy. That doesn't necessarily make everybody happy. That doesn't make, that might not be why you even build. You might not even like this kind of stuff. Why are you even watching this? Why are you watching? No, I'm kidding. So now I'm gonna start painting, and we'll take a look at the finished result in just a sec. I enjoyed the painting process on this. It was kind of a nice change of pace. I'm used to painting, well, I've been doing a lot of master grades lately, which isn't really my favorite thing just because there's so many tiny little pieces and I'm sitting there painting forever. Even though it's my favorite part, it does drag it on like a little too long for me sometimes. So this was kind of a nice switch up. Because it's such an old kit, there's not really a whole lot of details, so it required, I think, a little more oomph from me. So I hope that translated into the finished product. Actually, all in all, I'm really happy with it. I thought it was a fun project. I might do other Universal Century ships or X-Model ships in the future. Actually, there's a whole bunch of X-Model stuff I want to show off, but I'll do that in another video. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Don't forget, Liam's Hobby Room is brought to you by BC Shaver and Hobbies, so you can go to www.bcshaver.com and use the code PAINT20 and get yourself 20% off all hobby paints on the site. If you're looking for any Gunpla kits, actually this kit in particular you can check out on there. There's a whole bunch of classic plastic on there, so take a look, see what you can find, get something nice for yourself. Gotta treat yourself, know what I'm saying? And I'll see you guys next time.